The Dhammapada, Chapter 2, Appamāda Vagga, Heedfulness, verses 21, 22, and 23. The heedless die, the heedful do not. Appamādo amatapadang, pamādo macchuno padang. Appamatta na miyanti, ye pamatta yatha mata. Etang visesato nyatva, appamādam hi pandita. Appamāde pamodanti, ariyanang gochare rata. Te jhayino sa tatika, niccang dalha parakkama. Husanti dhira Nibbānang, yogakhemang anuttarang. Heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. The heedful do not die. The heedless are like the dead. Distinctly understanding this difference, the wise, intent on heedfulness, rejoice in heedfulness, delighting in the realm of the Aryas. The constantly meditative, the ever steadfast ones, realize the bond-free, supreme Nibbāna. Magandiya's plot against Queen Samavati. Queen Samavati had many maids of honor who attended to her every need. Among them was a maid called Kujuttara, whose duty was to buy flowers for Samavati from the florist Sumana every day. One day, Kujuttara had the opportunity to listen to a sermon delivered by the Buddha at the home of Sumana. Because of her spiritual attainment in her previous lives, the words of the Enlightened One helped her to attain Sotapatti, the first stage of awakening. On returning to the palace, she repeated the sermon to Samavati and her other maids, and they also realized Dhamma. From that day, Kujuttara did not have to do any major work, but was looked upon as mother and teacher to Samavati. Being an extremely intelligent person, she listened to the discourses of the Buddha and repeated them to Samavati and her maids. So great was her intellect that in the course of time, Kujuttara even mastered the Dhamma. Samavati and her maids liked to see and pay homage to the Buddha, but were afraid that the king might disapprove. So they would look at the Buddha by peeping through openings in the palace walls. They paid respects to the Buddha in this manner every time he passed the palace on his way to the homes of other devotees. At that time, the king had another consort by the name of Magandiya. She was the daughter of a Brahmin. The Brahmin once decided that the Buddha was the only person who was worthy enough to marry his very beautiful daughter. So he offered to give his daughter in marriage to the Buddha. Turning down his offer, the Buddha said, "Even after seeing the most beautiful girls, Tanha, Arati, and Raga, the daughters of Mara, I felt no desire in me for sensual pleasures. After all, what is this body which is full of filth?" The Buddha knew from the beginning that the Brahmin and his wife had reached the stage of mental purification, where they could attain Anagami that very day. Hence his reply to the Brahmin in the above manner. On hearing those words of the Buddha, both the Brahmin and his wife realized that all beauty is impermanent, and attained the third stage of sainthood. They entrusted their daughter to the care of her uncle, and both joined the order. Eventually, they attained arahanthood. But the story does not end there. The daughter, Magandiya, was very proud, and she took the Buddha's words as a personal insult. She became very bitter and vowed to take revenge when the opportunity arose. Later, her uncle presented Magandiya to King Udena, and she became one of his consorts. Magandiya learned of the arrival of the Buddha in Kosambi and how Samavati and her maids paid homage to him through holes in the walls of their living quarters. She planned to take her revenge on the Buddha and to harm Samavati and her maids. Magandiya told the king that Samavati and her maids had made holes in the walls of their living quarters and were being unfaithful to him. King Udena saw the holes in the walls, but when the matter was explained to him, he did not get angry. But Magandiya persisted in trying to make the king believe that Samavati was not loyal to him and was trying to kill him. On one occasion, knowing that the king would be visiting Samavati within the next few days, and that he would be taking along his lute with him, Magandiya inserted a snake into the lute and covered the hole with a bunch of flowers. Magandiya followed King Udena to Samavati's quarters, after trying to stop him on the pretext that she had some premonition that she was worried about his safety. At Samavati's place, Magandiya removed the bunch of flowers from the hole of the lute. The snake came out hissing and coiled itself on the bed. When the king saw the snake, he believed Magandiya's words, that Samavati was trying to kill him. The king was furious. He commanded Samavati to stand and all her ladies to line up behind her. Then he fitted his bow with an arrow dipped in poison and shot the arrow. But Samavati and her ladies bore no ill towards the king, and through the power of goodwill, metta, the arrow did not hit the target, although the king was an excellent archer. Seeing this obvious miracle, the king realized the innocence of Samavati, and he gave her permission to invite the Buddha and his disciples to the palace for alms food and religious discourses. Magandiya, realizing that none of her plots had materialized, made a final, infallible plan. She sent a message to her uncle with full instructions to go to Samavati's palace and burn down the building with all the women inside. As the house was burning, Samavati and her maids of honor, being advanced in spiritual attainment, continued to meditate in spite of the danger. Thus, some of them attained the second stage of sainthood, and the rest were also benefited before the palace was gutted with them inside. As soon as he heard the news, the king rushed to the scene, but it was too late. He suspected that it was done at the instigation of Magandiya, but he did not show that he was suspicious. Instead, he said, "While Samavati was alive, I had been fearful and alert, thinking I might be harmed by her. Only now is my mind at peace. Who could have done this? It must only have been done by someone who loves me very dearly." Hearing this, the foolish Magandiya promptly admitted that it was she who had instructed her uncle to do this terrible deed. Thereupon, the king pretended to be very pleased with her, and said that he would grant her a great favor, and honor all her relatives. So the relatives were sent for, and they came gladly. On arrival at the palace, all of them, including Magandiya, were seized and put to death in the palace courtyard. Thus the evil Magandiya was punished for plotting the death of the holy queen and her attendants. When the Buddha was told about these two incidents, he said that those who are mindful do not die, but those who are negligent are as dead even while living. Verse 24. The energetic prosper. Utthānavato satimato suchikamassa nisammakarino sanyatassa cha dhamma jivino appamattassa yaso bhivadhati. Whosoever is energetic, mindful, pure in conduct, discriminating, self-restrained, right-living, vigilant, his fame steadily increases. The voice of a rich man. Kumbha Gosaka. At one time, a plague broke out in the city of Vagga. A city banker, his wife, and other members of his household also succumbed to the disease. When they were both down with the disease, the couple told their young son, Kumbha Gosaka, to leave them and flee from the house and return only after the plague had subsided. They also told him that they had some valuable treasure buried at a certain place. The son did as he was told and stayed away from the city. Finally, after a long absence, he decided to return to the city. By that time, nobody in the city could recognize him. He went to the place where his parents had said the treasure was hidden and found it intact. But he realized that if he were to unearth the buried treasure, people might think a poor young man had become wealthy by wrongful means, and that he might be reported to the king. In that case, his property would be confiscated. So he decided not to unearth the treasure and went to look for work to support himself. He was given the job of waking up and rousing the people early in the morning, and of going round announcing that it was time to prepare food, time to fetch carts, yoke the bullocks, and similar chores. He was a kind of town crier whose services were necessary in the absence of clocks and alarms. One morning, King Bimbisara heard him. The king, who was very good at judging character by listening to voices, commented, "This is the voice of a man of great wealth." A female attendant, hearing the king's remarks, sent someone to investigate. She reported that the youth was only a hireling of the laborers. In spite of this report, the king repeated the same remark on 2 subsequent days. Again, inquiries were made, but with the same result. The attendant thought this was very strange, so she requested the king's permission to go and investigate the matter personally. Disguised as peasants, the attendant and her daughter set out for the homes of the laborers. Saying that they were travelers, they asked for shelter and were given accommodation in his house. They managed to prolong their stay there. During the period, the king proclaimed twice that a certain ceremony must be performed in the locality where the laborers lived, and that every household must make contributions. Kumbha Gosaka had no ready cash for such an occasion, so he was forced to get some gold coins from his treasure. As these coins were handed over, the attendant substituted them with her own money and sent the coins to the king. After some time, she sent a message to the king asking him to send some men and summon the young man to the court. Kumbha Gosaka very reluctantly went along with the men. The attendant and her daughter also went to the palace ahead of him. At the palace, the king told him to tell the truth and gave him due assurance that he would not be harmed if he were innocent. He then admitted that those gold coins were his, and also that he was the son of the city banker of Vagga, who had died in the plague years ago. He further revealed the place where the treasure was hidden. Subsequently, all the buried treasure was brought to the palace. The king appointed him to his father's position as a city banker and gave him one of his daughters in marriage. Afterwards, taking Kumbhagosaka along with him, the king went to pay homage to the Buddha at the Veluvana monastery, and told him how the youth, though rich, had earned his living as a servant of the laborers, and how he had appointed the youth as a banker because he was impressed by the young man's willingness to do even the most menial of jobs. When he was introduced to the Buddha, the Blessed One described the characteristics of those who can be prosperous. Verse 25. By their efforts, the wise create their own heavens. Uttanena Appamādena Sanyamena Dhammena cha Dipankairatha Medhavi Yangokho Nabhikirati. By sustained effort, earnestness, discipline, and self-control, let the wise man make for himself an island which no flood overwhelms. How a dullard attained sainthood. Chula Pantaka. A certain banker had two grandsons, named Mahapantaka and Chula Pantaka. Mahapantaka, being the elder, used to accompany his grandfather to listen to religious discourses. Later, Mahapantaka joined the holy order and in the course of time became an arahant. Chulapantaka followed his brother and also became a bhikkhu. But because in a previous existence Chulapantaka had made fun of a bhikkhu who was very dull, he was born a dullard in the present existence. He could not even memorize one verse in 4 months. Mahapantaka then suggested that it would be better for his brother to leave the holy order. One day, Jivaka, the doctor, invited the Buddha and the resident bhikkhus to his house for alms food. Chulapantaka's name was not on the list of the bhikkhus who could go. When he learned about this, he was very depressed and decided to return to the life of a householder. Knowing his intention, the Buddha made him sit in front of the monastery where the Buddha was residing at that time. He was given a clean piece of cloth and told to sit there facing the east and to simply rub the piece of cloth. At the same time, he was to repeat the word Rajoharanang, which means taking off impurity. The Buddha then went to the residence of Jivaka, accompanied by the bhikkhus who had been selected by his brother. When the Buddha was away, Chulapantaka went on rubbing the piece of cloth diligently, all the time muttering the word Rajoharanang. Very soon the cloth became soiled. Seeing this change in the condition of the cloth, his previous good karma finally bore fruit, and he came to realize the impermanent nature of all conditioned things. From the house of Jivaka, the Buddha, through his supernormal power, learnt about the progress of this young bhikkhu. He sent forth a radiance so that the Buddha appeared to be sitting in front of him, saying, "It is not the piece of cloth alone that is made dirty by the dust. Within oneself also there exists the dust of passion, raga, the dust of ill will, dosa, and the dust of ignorance, moha, which represent the ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. Only by removing these can one achieve one's goal and attain sainthood. Chulapantaka understood the message and continued meditating, and in a short while attained arahanthood himself, together with extraordinary knowledge and mental powers. At the house of Jivaka, they were about to pour water into a bowl as a symbol of offering, but the Buddha covered the bowl with his hand to prevent the offering and asked, "Are there any bhikkhus left at the monastery?" On being told that there were none, the Buddha replied that there was one and directed them to fetch Chulapantaka from the monastery. When the messenger from the house of Jivaka arrived at the monastery, he found not only one bhikkhu, but a large number of bhikkhus, all identical. They had all been created by Chulapantaka, who by now possessed supernormal powers. The messenger was baffled, and he reported the matter to Jivaka. The messenger was sent to the monastery for the second time, and was instructed to say that the Buddha summoned the bhikkhu by the name of Chulapantaka. But when he delivered the message, many voices responded, "I am Chulapantaka." Again baffled, he returned for the second time. Then he was sent to the monastery for the third time. This time he was instructed to get hold of the bhikkhu who first said that he was Chulapantaka. As soon as he got hold of that bhikkhu, all the rest disappeared. And Chulapantaka accompanied the messenger to the house of Jivaka. After the meal, as directed by the Buddha, Chulapantaka delivered a religious discourse confidently. Later, when the subject of Chulapantaka cropped up among the bhikkhus, the Buddha said that one who was diligent and steadfast in his striving would certainly attain arahanthood. Verses 26 and 27. Be heedful, not heedless. Appamādamanuyunjanti bala dumedhino jana Appamādang ca medhavi dhahanang setahamba rakhati ma pamādamanuyunjetha ma kamarati santhavang appamatto hi jhayanto pappoti vipulang sukham. Fools, men of little intelligence, give themselves over to negligence, but the wise man protects his diligence as a supreme treasure. Therefore, one should not be negligent, nor be addicted to sensual pleasures. The man who meditates with diligence attains much happiness. Childish behavior at a festival. At one time, a popular festival was being celebrated in Savatthi. During the festival, many young men smeared themselves with ash and cow dung and roamed about the city shouting and making themselves a nuisance to the public. They would also stop at the doors of householders and leave only when given some money. At that time, also, there were many lay disciples of the Buddha living in Savatthi. Knowing about these troublesome youths, they sent word to the Buddha requesting him to keep to the monastery and not to enter the city for 7 days. They sent alms food to the monastery, and they themselves kept to their own residences. On the 8th day, when the festival was over, the Buddha and his disciples were invited into the city to deliver religious discourses. On being told about the childish behavior of the young men during the festival, the Buddha commented that it was in the nature of those who were ignorant to behave without dignity and nobility. The Buddha then advised the lay disciples not to be negligent, nor to be addicted to sensual pleasures, but at all times to try to practice mindfulness. Through mindfulness, one will be able to gain happiness and realize Nibbāna, the bliss supreme. While listening attentively to the discourse given by the Enlightened One himself, the lay disciples were filled with joy and happiness. Thus they developed more confidence, saddha, in the sublime truth of the Dhamma. Verse 28. Heedlessness should be conquered by heedfulness. Pamadang appamādena yada nudati pandito panya pasadamaruiha asoko sokining pajang pabbatathova bhummathe dhiro bale avekhati. The wise one dispels negligence by means of mindfulness. He ascends the tower of wisdom, and being free from sorrow, looks at the sorrowing beings, just as one on the mountaintop looks at those on the plain below. So also the wise one, the Arahant, looks at the ignorant. Kassapa wants to know the number of births and deaths. On one occasion, Venerable Mahakassapa, while staying at Pippali cave, used his power of supernatural vision to find out beings who were mindful and beings who were negligent, and also those who were about to die and those who were about to be reborn. From his monastery, the Buddha saw through his divine vision what Mahakassapa was doing, and wanted to advise him that he was wasting his time. So he sent forth his radiance and appeared before Kassapa, and exhorted him thus: My son Kassapa, the knowledge of the cycle of births and deaths of living beings is incomprehensible. It is beyond your wisdom to understand. Only enlightened Buddhas can understand and explain the cycle of births and deaths of living beings. The author's note says that this story tells that one should not overreach oneself by trying to do things which do not bring benefit. Knowledge of the things Mahakassapa was trying to discover would not help him to understand the true nature of existence. The Buddha constantly advised his disciples to clearly understand the nature of existence and to strive only to escape rebirth in samsara. All other pursuits are fruitless. Through heedfulness one attains arahanthood. Such knowledge comes naturally to Buddhas who have supreme enlightenment. Verse 29. The strenuous and the alert overtake the thoughtless and the indolent. Appamatto pamatte su sutte su bahujagaro abalassam va sighasso hitva yati sumedhaso. Heedful among the heedless, watchful among the sleeping, the wise man outstrips the foolish man as a racehorse outstrips an old horse. The goal of the religious life. Two bhikkhus, after obtaining a subject of meditation from the Buddha, went to a monastery in the forest. One of them, being negligent, spent his time warming himself by the fire and talking to young novices throughout the first watch of the night, and generally idling away his time. The other faithfully performed the duties of a bhikkhu. He walked in meditation during the first watch, rested during the second watch, and again meditated during the last watch of the night. Thus, being diligent and ever mindful, the second bhikkhu attained arahanthood within a short time. At the end of the rainy season, Vassa, both of them went to pay homage to the Buddha, and he asked them how they had spent their time during the Vassa. The lazy and negligent bhikkhu answered that the other bhikkhu had been idling away his time just lying down and sleeping. The Buddha then asked the lazy bhikkhu, "But what about you?" He replied that he generally sat warming himself by the fire during the first watch of the night, and then sat up without sleeping. But the Buddha knew quite well how the two bhikkhus had spent their time. So he said to the idle one, "Though you are lazy and negligent, yet you claim to be diligent and ever mindful. But you have made the other bhikkhu appear to be lazy and negligent, even though he is diligent and ever mindful. You are like a weak and slow horse compared to my son, who is like a strong, fleet-footed horse." A note from the author. During the Buddha's time, the night was divided into 3 periods. First watch of the night was from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. The second watch was from 10 p.m. to 2 p.m. And then the last watch was from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Sometimes the second watch is referred to as the middle watch. Verse 30. Earnestness leads to sovereignty. Appamādena maghava devanang siddhatang gato appamādang pasangsanti pamādo garahito sada. Maghava, the king of gods, attained such great supremacy over the gods through heedfulness. Heedfulness is always praised and heedlessness is always blamed. How Magha became Sakka. One day, a Lichavi prince named Mahali came to listen to a religious discourse given by the Buddha. The discourse given was Sakkapanya Sutta. The Buddha spoke of Sakka vividly in glowing terms. So, Mahali thought that the Buddha must have personally met Sakka. To confirm this, he asked the Buddha, who replied, "Mahali, I do know Sakka. I also know what has made him a Sakka." He then told Mahali that Sakka, king of the Devas, was in a previous existence a young man by the name of Magha, in the village of Machala. The youth Magha and his 32 companions had undertaken many socially useful tasks, such as building roads and rest houses. Magha took it upon himself also to observe 7 obligations. These 7 obligations were that, throughout his life, 1. He would support his parents. 2. He would respect the elders. 3. He would be gentle of speech. 4. He would avoid backbiting. 5. He would not be avaricious, but would be generous. 6. He would speak the truth. And 7. He would restrain himself from losing his temper. It was because of his enormous good deeds and right conduct in that existence that Magha was reborn as Sakka, king of the Devas. Verse 31. The heedful advance. Appamādarato bhikkhu pamāde bhayadassiva sanyojanang anungtulang dahang aggiva gacchati. The bhikkhu who delights in heedfulness and looks with fear on heedlessness advances like fire, burning all fetters, great and small. The fire of knowledge. A certain bhikkhu, after obtaining a subject of meditation from the Buddha, went to the forest to meditate. Although he tried hard, he made very little progress in his meditation practice. As a result, he became very depressed and frustrated. So, with the thought of getting further specific instructions from the Buddha, he set out for the Jetavana monastery. On his way, he came across a big blazing fire. he went up to the top of a mountain and observed the fire from there. As the fire spread, it suddenly occurred to him that just as the fire burnt up everything, so also the development of insight can burn up all the fetters of life, big and small. Meanwhile, the Buddha was aware of what the bhikkhu was thinking. So he transmitted his radiance and appeared to the bhikkhu and spoke to him. "My son," he said, "you are on the right line of thought. Keep it up. Even as fire consumes all obstacles, both great and small, a bhikkhu who delights in heedfulness and who views heedlessness with fear consumes all fetters, both great and small." Reflecting mindfully on the admonition given, the bhikkhu later attained arahanthood. A note from the author on fetters. There are 10 kinds of fetters, namely self-illusion or sakkaya ditthi, doubts, vicikicca, indulgence in wrongful rites and ceremonies, silabbata paramasa, sense desires, kama raga, hatred, patigha, attachment to the realms of form, rupa raga, attachment to the formless realms, arupa raga, conceit, mana, restlessness, uddhacca, and ignorance, avidya. The first 5, which relate to the sensual sphere and pertaining to this shore, orambhagiya, are regarded as small. The remaining 5 relate to the further shore, uddhambhagiya, and are regarded as higher. Of the first 5, 3 are eradicated on attaining the first stage of sainthood, sotapatti. The next 2 in this set are attenuated in the second stage of sainthood, sakadagami, and destroyed on attaining the third stage, anagami. The further shore fetters, which form the remaining 5, are eradicated on attaining the fourth and final stage of sainthood, of arahanthood. Verse 32. The heedful are in the presence of Nibbāna. Appamāda rato bhikkhu pamāde bhaya dassiva abhabbo parihanaya Nibbānaseva santike. The bhikkhu who delights in heedfulness and looks with fear on heedlessness is not liable to fall. He is in the presence of Nibbāna. The monk who developed contentment, Tissa. Nigamavasi Tissa was born and brought up in a small town near Savatthi. After becoming a bhikkhu, he lived a very simple life. For alms food, he went to the village where his relatives were staying and accepted whatever was offered to him. He avoided big celebrations and ceremonies. Even when Anatha Pindika and King Pasenadi of Kosala made offerings on a grand scale, he did not go. Some bhikkhus then started talking about him. They accused him of keeping close to his relatives and not caring to go even when people like Anathapindika and King Pasenadi were making offerings on a grand scale and so on. When the Buddha was told about this, he sent for the monk to give him the opportunity to explain that while it was true he frequently went to his village, it was only to get alms food, and when he had received enough food, he did not go any further, never caring whether the food was delicious or not. Whereupon the Buddha applauded him for his conduct in the presence of the other bhikkhus. He also told them that to live contentedly with only a few wants is in conformity with the teaching of the Buddha and the noble ones, and that all bhikkhus should indeed be like Tissa. In this connection, he further related the story of the king of the parrots. Once upon a time, the king of the parrots lived in a grove of fig trees on the banks of the Ganges River, with a large number of his followers. When the fruits were eaten, all the parrots left the grove, except the parrot king, who was well contented with whatever was left in the trees where he dwelt, be it shoot or leaf or bark. Sakka, the king of the gods, knowing this and wanting to test the virtue of the parrot king, withered up the trees by his supernormal power. Then, assuming the form of geese, Sakka and his queen came to where the parrot king was and asked him why he did not leave the old withered tree that had stopped bearing fruit plentifully. The parrot king replied, "Because of a feeling of gratitude towards a tree I did not leave, and so long as I can get just enough food to sustain myself, I shall not forsake it." Much impressed by this reply, Sakka, the king of the gods, revealed himself. He took water from a river and poured it over the withered fig tree, and it was revived.